New Adventure Island on the TurboGrafx-16 Mini. No one probably knows this. This is basically the localization of Wonder Boy, the arcade game that I've never played. You know how Super Mario Bros. 2 on the NES is just a reskin of a Japanese game called Doki Doki Panic that had absolutely nothing to do with Mario Brothers? This game is apparently a skin, sort of a westernized skin, I suppose, of an arcade game called Wonder Boy, which was a pretty conventional, how do I describe it? It's a pretty conventional ratchet-scrolling platformer, like Mario Brothers. Only there's like a stamina meter that where your health is constantly counting down, and the only way to get it back is to collect fruit. So there isn't really a timer in this game. It's just sort of a constantly depleting stamina meter, and the fruit you collect replenishes that meter. There's another. You also get a skateboard. Apparently, one of the other bits about this game is that at some point, well, I mean, you can also run like in Mario because you can hold down the attack button, but it's like Mario in the sense that if you always have a fire flower, basically. But it's a pretty conventional ratchet-scrolling platformer as far as I've been told. Yeah, your girlfriend's been kidnapped. You remember Master Higgins, don't you? I've never played an Adventure Island game before, so this is all news to me. I've seen like playthroughs of bits of it. Like I've seen bits of this game, but I've never actually played it. Although I did play Super Adventure Island on the Super NES. I should mention that. Gimme. I said it was ratchet scrolling. You can go backwards a little bit, so there is that. But you can also hold down the attack button to run a bit faster. Did I turn off? Yeah, you have to turn off the turbo function in this game. I want to run. You're jumping over the rocks because they do damage. They do 2 pips of damage. You go a bit faster on the skateboard, but you can't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. That's Master Higgins. Yeah, he's allowed to be anachronistic. You can also take a hit, but as you saw, I lost my skateboard. So let's get moving. I didn't know you could, so now I'm invincible with the fairy along my side. So yeah, the game's a bunch of this. It's go to the right and eat a bunch of fruit. The platforming stuff shows up later. Right now, it's just pretty conventional. This game was apparently a huge deal in Japan. Like, the Adventure Island games were a massive deal in Japan, apparently. They kept making sequels to them, obviously, but I want to say Adventure Island 2 and 3 all showed up on the NES. Adventure Island 3, I seem to recall, was pretty ambitious. Like, it was like Mario Bros. 3. They had different mounts different dinosaur mounts that Master Higgins could ride. And I think there was like a map, like in Mario Bros. 3, where you like had to choose which areas you wanted to go to next. Like, maybe some secret areas you can unlock. I don't remember. I never got a chance to play it. But apparently it was a pretty interesting platformer back in the early 90s. But yeah, I was told that, yeah, these Adventure Island games were a huge deal in Japan. Like, not as big as, like, Dragon Quest or anything, but apparently they sold, like, millions of copies. I'll double-check that. And, of course, they were a big deal for Hudson as well. But they were coming out on the NES, and Nintendo was allowing Hudson to release these games on the NES. Or the Famicom, if you will. But this is worth noting. This is sort of... Whoops. This is sort of notable because this console, the PC Engine, was actually more popular than the NES was back when I think it debuted in like 1987, and it was the best-selling console in Japan for a couple of years. Look at that. So basically, until the Super Famicom came out in 1991, the PC Engine was the most popular console in Japan for several years, which kind of shocked me when I found that out. I'm looking for some confirmation on that, but yeah, apparently every year the PC Engine sold more units than the Famicom did. But that's technically not that surprising. Because by that point, the Famicom had been out in Japan for like 6 years. Actually, no, it was like it came out in Japan in 1983, right? Something like that. And for 4 years, the Famicom was #1, but then this console came out in '87, and it was more powerful, obviously. So that's certainly, and you ended up getting games like this that ran a lot better than the NES games did. I mean, again, by the time, you know, what games are we talking about here? I mean, obviously the hardware was pretty dated by the time this console came out in 1987. But it was clearly viable until, like, 1993. I mean, Kirby's Dream Land came out in I think it was Kirby's Adventure came out in 1993 on the Famicom. And that was long into the, that was several years into the Super Famicom's run. This console was putting out some legitimate, you know, hits. Batman Return of the Joker is still my choice for the best looking NES game ever made. That came out in, what, 1993, I want to say? It might have been 1992. But it came out about, well, Batman Returns was one of the last NES games that got released. Konami did that one. They also did TMNT Tournament Fighters on the NES, if you can believe that. But I mean, that's how long the Famicom was in existence. They were actually making legit fighting games for it, although Tournament Fighters was not a very good game, I've been told. It was actually a very bad fighting game. But there was something kind of ballsy about putting out like an actual one-on-one fighting game on the NES. Like a traditional Street Fighter II like fighting game. Smaller sprites, obviously. Because I mean, there were you know, a number of dueling games on the NES and the Genesis prior to Street Fighter II coming out. There was I think Fighting Masters by Treco was one of those games on the Genesis, I remember. I think there might have been a couple more. I mean, like Double Dragon obviously had a one-on-one fighting mode on it. But again, that's how long the system was in existence. They actually made a Ninja Turtles fighting game for it in '93. That's how long that console was just hanging around. A console whose hardware came out in 1983. And it wasn't even state-of-the-art when it came out in '83. I mean, it was better than the Ataris, you know, the 2600, obviously. But yeah, that hardware was from like the early 1980s, and they were still cranking out fighting games on that same hardware a decade later. I mean, it wasn't a good fighting game. Like I said, it basically looked like you remember Raging Fighter on the Game Boy? It looked like that. With smaller characters. You're like, what? Yeah, fighting. Yeah, like, I mean, like, you could do fighting games in the NES, obviously. It was just a matter of not, you know, overdoing it. Like, obviously, you know, they were making wrestling games on that console. So it wasn't out of the question. It looks like the fruit sometimes fades away if you don't pick it up right away. That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, like, you obviously make games like, you know, what was it? Battle Blaze was so awful. That Battle Blaze game was Super Famicom. I mean, yeah, you could definitely do games like, you know, a Ninja Turtles fighting game. You probably could have done a port of Street Fighter 1 if you wanted to. I mean, the TurboGrafx got one. It was called Fighting Street. It was terrible. But it was apparently, you know, Street Fighter 1. A port of Street Fighter 1. I don't know if it was a CD-ROM game or just a regular HuCard cartridge game. For people who don't remember, the TurboGrafx-16 used, like, cartridges that were, I want to say they were about the size of a credit card. If they were like a thick credit card, maybe about, imagine stacking 3 or 4 credit cards on top of each other. That might give you some idea about how big these cartridges were. So they weren't really that thick. They didn't have to be that thick. And they have plenty of memory in them. I mean, you can put like what? Like the cartridges could be bigger than your average NES game, obviously. But I want to say most HuCard games were about what? A quarter of a megabyte, maybe an eighth. Like, we're talking about 128 kilobytes, I want to say. I'll double check. Whoops. I think you can blow up these rocks. Can I continue from here? I want to say the TurboGrafx-16 didn't have battery backup, but I think you could buy like a cartridge, like a special turbo boost or something, that allowed you to save video games as you went. I don't know how that works. But I'm looking at the manuals for these games, and apparently there was like, what do you call them? There was a turbo boost, which I believe was like a battery backup, which allowed you to save your progress. And the CD-ROM system apparently allowed the ability, gave you the ability to save games too. So I guess it's kind of like a memory card, or like the RAM, or like the RAM card on the Saturn, I want to say. Because you could buy memory cards for the Sega Saturn. There were these little cartridges you would put in the back of the unit that allowed you to save your progress. They were like memory cards for the, and for the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation, they had memory cards. But nowadays we save everything on the console itself. So it's not but I mean, what was it? Well, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 all allowed you to save your progress on regular old USB sticks. And, what was it? The Nintendo Wii lets you save on SD cards. I mean, that's perfect. I mean, that stuff's really cheap. I mean, I want to say the Wii allows you to use 16 gigabyte SD cards, which I'm sure the pirates know all about. All the homebrewers out there know all about that. Careful, wait, careful. Controls reasonably tight. See, this character controls a lot better than Bonk does. Bonk has, like I said, Bonk has that long wind up, which is kind of annoying, but the lag, yeah. So I was able to destroy the rock with two of these boomerangs. Yeah, but I think the problem is that Bonk has that wind up when he walks. It's kind of like Mario, where he doesn't move as soon as you use the D-pad to move him to the left or right. He has kind of a slow wind up. But Bonk doesn't really run. He has Mario's walking speed, but he has the wind up of Mario's running speed, which is weird. And I don't know how many continues. I hopefully have unlimited continues. Let me go back and check. I also got a Gauntlet clone called Dungeon Explorer. I'm going to show you a bit later. It's New Adventure Island, not Super Adventure Island. In Ninja Spirit, I'm definitely going to want to show you. That looks like a really interesting arcade platformer. Well, it's arguably not a platformer. It's more of a combat-driven, side-scrolling game. We have like 6 different weapons you can choose from. They're all pretty interesting. And it's kind of like, and they have this bit like in Ninja Gaiden 2, where you can like get a Ninja Gaiden 2 on the NES. You can have like ninja clones that follow your actions. Kind of like the ghost ships in Salamander and Light Force. So that's kind of cool. So we'll be playing that a bit later. Careful! So this character is pretty responsive. So I guess the problem is that Bonk just has that built-in input lag that makes him slightly clumsy to use. That's kind of disappointing. But the control in this game seems pretty tight. I mean, sure, apparently this console has some input lag built into it, so that's not great. I mean, it's an emulator. And emulators almost invariably have input lag of some kind. This seems perfectly doable. I mean, for a game like this, it seems perfectly... I'm just not very good at this game. I'm practicing, bear with me. This game's a lot more action-driven. Like, it's not... This game isn't as technical as something like, you know, Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers. It's very much a jump-and-shoot kind of game. And, of course, the pressure of having to constantly eat. I don't know how I feel about that. I think the arrows might be more useful in these boomerangs, actually. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, the timer's still going down. So the timer's based on a bar. I kind of wish they would just show you like a number. Like, remember that Alien Soldier game on the Genesis where they allowed you to choose between a health bar or numbers that are attached to a health bar? Might make it easier for you to figure out where how much health you're losing every second. Whoops! I was supposed to hold down the run button there. How many continues I got? Let me do a quick check. I'm gonna pull out the manual. Give me a second. We're gonna end the video pretty soon anyway. Yeah, we know that. Let me see what the continue options are. Doesn't mention the continue option. Here we go. You can continue as often as you like. Well, that's nice of them. That's sweet. Unlimited continues in a game like this might make it a bit too easy for some people. I'll be the first to admit that. So let's see if we can get past this game without dying. Oh, check out. Here's a disclaimer they got. Here's a disclaimer they got at the end of this. They got at the end of this manual that Konami digitized. This instruction manual is a digitized version. This instruction manual is a digitalized version of the one included with the game's original release. It may contain content that is considered inappropriate by today's standards, but we have kept editing to a minimum in order to preserve the atmosphere of the original. It may also contain features and controls that cannot be used with this product, or contact information that is no longer valid. And of course, that's really hilarious coming from Konami, whose American localizers would constantly put in politically incorrect stuff in their manuals. They were hilarious, but they're kind of inappropriate. Read the instruction manual for Laser Invasion if you ever get a chance. The names they created for those enemies were kind of... Let's just say they're kind of naughty in that late 80s, early 90s kind of way. They're naughty and kind of like... I guess they're naughty in like a Mad Magazine kind of way. I guess you might put it like that. Like I said, late 80s. Like early Married with Children kind of humor. No jokes about boobs though, but you know, a little frat house humor, if you will. National Lampoon-esque. I wonder who actually wrote those manuals. Whoever wrote those manuals should probably be like an internet sensation by now. The retro community should be. Someone's gonna do like a documentary about the guy who wrote those manuals. He's probably gonna get canceled. Or they're gonna say, yeah, that was the spirit of the manuals we wrote, you know, back then. You know, it's like we wanted to separate ourselves. The Konami manuals were kind of amusing. At least my memories of them were kind of amusing. I'm pretty sure someone scanned them by now. Has someone scanned those manuals on like the Internet Archive yet? There we go. Yeah, I gotta have to run before I do these jumps. And apparently if I collect multiple types of the same... If I collect multiple types of the same fruit, I get, whoops. Darn it. So how am I supposed to make that jump without tripping on the rock? But apparently if I get multiple times of the same fruit, I end up getting a watermelon, which refills most of my health, if not all of it. So if I hold out and collect only the same fruit, like if I collect like 2 or 3, if I get like 3 or 4, I think it's like, if I collect 5 of the same specific fruit, I end up getting a watermelon later. I'll see what the manual says. Whoops. Well, that's not gonna do me any good. I still don't have any weapons. Yeah, I need some weapons for... Ah! Crap. I need a legendary axe to kill this spider. I do think it's weird that Legendary Axe is not on here. Which is it's apparently one of the first it's supposed to be one of the first good games on the TurboGrafx-16. I want to say it was the first, that was the launch title. I want to say it was the first launch title that was actually good on the console. And as I recall, Video Games Computer Entertainment Magazine chose that game as the best game of the year when it launched. 1989, I think it was. I'll double check. I mean, I was under the impression it's just kind of too simplistic, but they have the whole, you know, they have this whole automatic charging system where the weapon just got stronger if you didn't shoot it, if you didn't press the attack button. So the whole conceit was that if you weren't attacking enemies, you could charge up your axe to maximum power, then just press the button and you get full power. but if you mashed on the attack button, it did less damage. But you didn't have to hold the button down. You just kind of had to not attack anyone. You just had to not press the attack button. So this arrow goes nearly the length of the screen before falling to the ground. I wonder if it does damage when it falls. Yeah, I think it does damage while it's falling. Yeah, don't grab that. Don't grab the. Yeah, don't grab the boomerangs. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can manipulate these arrows a bit. I wonder if the Japanese version of this game is on here, because I want to say it's still Wonder Boy, not Master Higgins. Ow! The Master Higgins was something of a... I mean, they tried to make him into a mascot, I want to say. He was probably only popular for like maybe a few years. But for a few games, he was pretty good. But I mean, they did release. Yes, Adventure Island 2 did come out. Super Adventure Island on Super NES did come out over here. But that might have ended the series. Oh well. So we're gonna see a remake of Master Higgins. Well, probably shouldn't ask Konami to do it. They'll probably turn him into a pachinko machine. Because F Konami, am I right? God forbid they actually make, whoops. God forbid they actually put Master Higgins in a good video game. Maybe a former employee of Konami could, or former employee of Hudson and Konami could, kickstart a Metroidvania game with Master Higgins. It doesn't have to be 3D, it can just be like a polygonal 2D game like Bloodstained was. Okay, we'll give this one more try. I mean, this game isn't bad, it's just I'm probably just being impatient. I just have to buckle down. Get good. I mean, this seems perfectly serviceable, it's just not a lot to it. Like, you can run, but you don't have a lot, there's no real momentum to your jumps. I mean, the controls are nice and crisp, I mean, they work perfectly fine. The game's reasonably responsive. But it's not a game where you can just jump on enemies' heads. It's not like that. And once you accept that, that's more of a jump and shoot game. Once you accept that, it's kind of fun. This kind of, again, I wish the weapons were a bit more distinct. Like the hatchet's fine, the arrows are fine. Like I said, it's kind of like Adventure Island. Like, that was my thing with Super Adventure Island. It's like, it was extremely, you know, I mean, the pace was actually kind of slow. The pace was slower than the arcade game that it was based on, pretty much. Because remember, Super Adventure Island had like much larger sprites than this, but the screen was really constrained. Like, it was very much just a game about going left to right and doing nothing else. So once you got past the dope Yuzo Koshiro music, it really wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, that entire game soundtrack was like, yeah, did you like Streets of Rage? Well, here's the Super NES version of that. Maybe with a bit more calypso in it every now and then. Yeah, Super Adventure Island was basically just, you know, hip-hop. And not reggaeton. Just hip-hop. It was Yuzo Koshiro just doing his old early 90s dance club thing. I don't blame him. Crap. Obviously, the guy had range. I mean, he was doing, you know, symphonic scores like ActRaiser. And he did... And, of course, he was doing Adventure Island and Streets of Rage. He was fun. But it wasn't his best soundtrack. It was like, it had some good bits in it. So we'll end the video here.